We're in Eagle's Nest Wood, and looking out over the Long Range River behind us. 30th of April 2021. Natural oak wood area which was heavily infested with rhododendron, and what you see here is a lot of dead rhododendron which was treated about 10 to 15 years ago and left in the wood, piled. Also in the vicinity there's standing dead rhododendron in quite a large quantity. So you can see here a lot of dry wood. Some days ago there was probably the biggest wildfire that ever occurred in Killarney National Park, and these areas where the dead rhododendron were left, sometimes a lot denser than what we're seeing here, the fire has burnt in and created, which would not be an exaggeration to call, infernos capable of cracking rocks, killing the trees and so forth. This area was close to the burnt area. It may have been saved by, there was a number of helicopters involved in fighting the fire, a lot of people, so it may be that that's what stopped it getting in. Just adjacent to us we have an area where the fire got in, and what you'll see there is what it looks like after an area like this with all this dead rhododendron goes on fire. So you can see some of it here that I'm looking at is standing rhododendron which was growing right up into that holly bush, and it's dry, and if it was reached by the fire, the holly bush would be burnt. So here again we have oak trees, holly. Now you can look here, if you see in this, you can actually singeing in branches over here. So we'll now go over to the adjacent area where the wood was reached by the fire, and we'll look at the consequences. Just while here, whereas the rhododendron was cut, there's a lot of seed remaining, and plenty of rhododendron, small one there. Anyway, we'll now move over to the adjacent area and have a look over the ridge. In fact, I'll just walk over. Okay, here we go. Just over to the ridge here. I'll try not to fall over it. And here we have a rather different colour. You can see two rucksacks down there maybe. And this area had obviously a large quantity of dead rhododendron, and it went up in a massive fire which has done great damage to the trees, and as you'll see in a minute or two, it was hot enough to break rocks. So looking over here, okay, we're just moving over to an oak tree, so you can see that was doing okay, and if we look in closely you can see the bottom is entirely charred around. Now that may kill the bark entirely, in which case the tree is doomed, or it's conceivable that someone may survive as a band of living bark which will try and grow around dead wood, and the next time a fire comes through, that dead wood will catch fire and the tree will be killed. This is a relatively small area. Obviously it goes further on the back, but we're talking about large areas in which the dead and left standing rhododendron, very, very dense, and which was left standing for up to 10 years, and it was literally tons of dead firewood, and when the fire came, the inevitable happened. Okay, we'll go down below and have a look. Interestingly, this woodland now crunches underfoot. Just stopping off on the way down, this is the roots of the tree we were just looking at. So you have this tangle of roots which are exposed, and they're all charred. So the chances of this tree surviving would be very, very small, I would imagine. Here we've got bare rock, probably some of it fractured in the heat. And coming over here you can see a large quantity of semi-burnt rhododendron charred. Mostly burnt. Curiously, a small area here in the middle which escaped the fire. It's possible it's a place where a bucket of one of these helicopters may have landed a large quantity of water at that stage as possible. And this would have been the centre of the fire. And this, as you can see, large rhododendron rooted into the rock there. It's fallen over as to whether it did during the fire, probably not. But it was stem treated, died, and has now added fuel to the fire. Okay, here you can take a look at what the ground is like. It's just, this is all charcoal and ash. And here we have a rock. I'll just step on it now and you see, look, it's just crumbling. So we're talking about intense heat. Another area, again, charred large rhododendron in large quantities, and up to the side, branches that weren't burnt. There's parts that were burnt and then left some unburnt behind. And we'll just pan over. Dead tree there, and beside it, beautiful multi-stem pollard oak, burnt right around. Large base stem, could be very old. And beside it, a holly which has got a right hammering. And here's the typical of Killarney oak woods and oak trees. The branches can dip down. It's almost like propping up the tree on its elbow and then grown up. This is all the same oak tree. And as you can see, it's charred all the way along the branches, and behind it you have the black rhododendron which did the damage. So we'll just move over to that tree now so you can see it more. We're now looking at that big oak tree from the other side just to take a look at it. So you can see a big base, probably very old I would imagine, and then it looks like there was a bit of dead wood there in the middle, and then the branches going off from that, and this one heading off down, propping itself up and out. So this is all burnt. As you can see, loads of dead rhododendron all around us. I'll just do a scan around. Look down at my feet here. So this would have been an extremely hot fire. A lot of charcoal. More damage up there. As you can see, this trunk is burnt right up, way up to the top. Now what's happening here is that the bark may well die. The sapwood hasn't been burnt. Live oak, as anybody who knows, by putting a green live oak log on a fire, it won't burn for hours. So the heart of the tree won't burn, but the bark may be killed. I'll just zoom further over there now. This area, what we're looking at here, is replicated in hundreds of locations through this side of the national park. This is our second day out looking at it. Say this one, it's surrounded. I believe that this one must have had firefighting intervention because there's dry rhododendron. You can see there and behind, perhaps, as the branch I'm looking at, and then behind that you've got a big wodge of dead rhododendron. So I think that some good work may have been done. Looking off through and down on the other side, you can see out in the open bog area burning out there as well. Okay, we're on about 50 metres further now, and again there's another fire area, perhaps a little bit smaller. This one again, as with the previous one, it's surrounded by thick dead rhododendron which was left after being killed. I'm just looking through it. This is dry dead rhododendron, semi-burnt there. Again, I feel that this may have been an area that was water bombed by the helicopters, more big, massive. That's dry rhododendron going right up. And here coming around, piles of, this is all dead rhododendron, and then we hit the fire. And here's the rhododendron branches charred and burned in the middle, presumably where the fire was most intense. And then, unfortunately, another beautiful old oak tree. It must have blown over partially in the wind, maybe 50, maybe 100 years ago. And it's propped up on its elbow here. And growing out, you can see the leaves at the top of it, all shriveled. And looking at the higher up branches, again the fire has reached virtually to the top. It's scorched right to the top, and the branches are blackened nearly to the top. Again, it could conceivably survive if a bit of the bark has remained intact, but it seems unlikely. As you can see, it's really, really badly charred. And what did it? This is what did it. Plenty of beautiful, big, dry rhododendron left for the last 10 years. And that's it. Okay, let's look around. And another fine tree down there, oak tree. Singed rhododendron. I think, is that? No, maybe that's, could be ivy, but anyway. Here we have another oak tree singed, charred right up to there. And holly. And another oak tree there. And looking way off into the distance, you can see down below, out to the outer bog where the fire spread. Okay, we're moving on from that last scorched site, and again, loads and loads of, seemingly, some of it looks as if it might have been cut, but dead rhododendron piled up off there in the distance. So there's ample fuel here. I think probably this area was saved by firefighting. But you listen, these ones will be done in the next fire, I suppose. Plenty left for that. Zooming ahead. So what we have there is enough rhododendron to do a fine job on all the trees surrounding it. And what we've seen in previous days, this is relatively moderate stuff compared to what we've seen in some of the other woods. But looking just around me here, beautiful old holly, an oak which hasn't got done, and rhododendron, dead wood around me. We're getting into bigger piles now here. It's getting quite difficult to walk through, and I can see off in the distance a burnt area which we'll head for. You can see through the trees there, so we'll head over there and have a look. Just in case we're concentrating too much on the rhododendron and the fire, this is an absolutely stunning Killarney oak wood, typical of the woods on the western side of the park. Cliffs, ravines, trees growing at the top of bluffs. Plenty of rhododendron here, lovely moss still hanging in there, arbutus, holly and so forth. Here a raven off in the distance. And we haven't have a nest higher up, and they may not be pleased with us. Okay, we're into the next burnt area now, and what you're looking at here is another way of getting rid of dead rhododendron, which was to build what they call dead hedges around the edges of the wood. Now what you're looking at there is a dead hedge which is burned, and there's a lot of semi-burned rhododendron in there. And just zoom out a little, and you can see the recipients of that particular configuration. So this We're on a hill here, so the fire would have burnt up and badly singed these holly trees. And here close beside me there's charred trees and hollies. We're on the north side of Eagle's Nest Wood now. We still have our ravens keeping us company and a cuckoo there a little while ago. So, okay, plenty more dead rhododendron up there, seemingly cut. I think in this area there's a stump which may have regrown, rhododendron stump. And our dead hedges, you can follow it along. You can see it off in the distance. Okay, we'll follow down along the dead hedge to the more recent method. So as you can see, this dead hedge was actually running around live oak trees. So a lot of this seems to have had a very large amount. It may have been morphing into a pile rather than a dead hedge. And here we have a very thoroughly burnt holly. It's interesting, there seems to be some sort of resin oozing out of it there. You may be able to see that. And what looks like a young oak tree beside it, singed to about 3 or 4 meters up, I guess. And following on the dead hedge around the boulder. Again, I think the helicopter water bombing may have avoided a much worse fire event. Okay, the dead hedge seems to be heading off down there, so as you can see, huge amounts of dead rhododendron in them. And then beyond that we have stem treated rhododendron where they weren't cut down, they're treated with herbicide and left standing. So you can see what we have here is a wall of rhododendron, not particularly old. Some of the dead hedging is a lot, or not dead hedging I should say, the kill and leave standing rhododendron was way taller. So you can see that's just in situ, I'm not sure, maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago, and still standing there. It would be tinder dry and highly flammable. So the fact that the fire got so close and there seems to be heather in between, I suspect that it may have been stopped by intervention. This is a good location to talk briefly about the other woods we've had a look at. So what we're looking at down here below us is the Long Range River, heading down to what's called the meeting of the waters. It's the dividing of the waters, and one branch goes into the middle lake there and the other into the lower lake beyond. Now what we're looking down into is frequently referred to as the Glasheenamara Valley. There's some very ancient, well, most of these woods are almost certainly classified as ancient woodland, but the woods at the top of the Glasheenamara Valley have pollen analysis and that proves that. Okay, beyond that little lake there's woodland running back over towards Glenagh, and up here there's other woods. So you've got these woods running in a band back out towards Glenagh Wood. Now those woods were treated with this the treat and leave standing method, and what we experienced there, you can see one area black, so there's much more extensive areas than what we're observing here on the Eagle's Nest. So that wood looks to me like it may have simply burnt where it was able to burn. So sorry amount of intense rhododendron fires in there. Also in the bog area, Dinis Bog out there, there are, or I should say were, little clumps of woodland on the rocky outcrops, which became infested with rhododendron, with the oak trees and hollies sticking their heads out of the top. Those rhododendrons were killed and left standing, or cut and piled, and massive damage done in those pockets of woodland across the bog. So really, the big multiplier of the fire was the areas where there was rhododendron killed in dense areas of rhododendron, and where the biomass of the wood was simply left in piles, in dead hedges, or standing, and then that burnt 12 years after or thereabouts.